Namo Amituofo Buddha. Hello everyone. So in this video, I'd like to share why it's important for Nianfo practitioners to keep the mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha now and also at the time of death, and also why it's important for Nianfo practitioners to cultivate good deeds, good merits, good karma, and transfer this towards seeking rebirth to the Pure Land. So I heard some people say that one only needs to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha now, and one doesn't need to be mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of death, then one can seek rebirth. Well, this is incorrect. Sure, we should not be over worried about what might happen at the time of death, but we also need to be mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of death in order to seek rebirth successfully, particularly at the time of death, because that is really the critical moments that our consciousness left this physical body, and we need to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha or be mindful of Amitabha Buddha in our mind in order to elicit a response from Amitabha Buddha, and so he can help to deliver us to the Pure Land. So I'm gonna share two failed rebirth cases in this video for Nianfo practitioners to be alert. So I'm not here to try to scare you or any Nianfo practitioners. This is still the easiest method in Buddhism, maybe out of all the practices you can find in this world, to help us exit the cycle of reincarnation and to be reborn in the Buddha's Pure Land. But it's also important for us to know what works and what might not work. So all the successful rebirth cases were because the people were mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of near death, or if not at the time of death, then during the battle period after their death, the intermediate state after this life and to the next life. If during the battle period the consciousness remembered to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha, then it may also be possible for them to seek rebirth, like we have seen in Vajra Bhikkhuni's case, who were not mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of her death. She had a sudden heart attack, and for whatever reason, she did not remember Amitabha Buddha at the time of death, so she did not seek rebirth immediately. But we saw in the video later, there were other people assisting her in Nianfo, and throughout the battle period, the first 7 days, her consciousness recited the name of Amitabha Buddha to allow her to seek rebirth to the Pure Land, even after 3 days of her death. But to seek rebirth during the battle period successfully is still relatively rare. But what we should really do is to aim for seeking rebirth at the time of death. And in the Amitabha Sutra, it also states clearly. So in the Amitabha Sutra, Buddha told Sariputra, who was one of Buddha's top disciples, known as foremost in wisdom. Sariputra, one cannot be born in this land through minor good roots, blessings, virtues, and causal connections. Sariputra, if there are good men or good women who hear of Amitabha Buddha and recite his name one-heartedly without confusion for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or 4 days or 5 days or 6 days or 7 days, then when they are about to die, Amitabha Buddha and all the sages will appear before them. If at the time of death their minds will not fall into delusion, then they will attain rebirth to Amitabha Buddha's land of ultimate bliss. So as we can see that it's really important for us at the time of death that our minds are unconfused. Our mind will not fall into delusion, which means our mind is mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of death in order for us to seek rebirth successfully. And also here in the Amitabha Sutra, when they talk about 1 day or 2 days, 3 days or 7 days, 7 is a cycle. What this means is really constantly in our life. So it doesn't necessarily mean 7 whole days, but what it means is that we practice this regularly in our life. So this refers to the ordinary period, ordinary time that we practice. But at the time of death, we also need to be mindful of Amitabha Buddha. So I highly recommend Master Yi, the ninth patriarch of Chinese Pure Land Buddhism, his commentary on the Amitabha Sutra. But I noticed in the English translation of the commentary in the footnote, there could be a few mistakes. For instance, so the translator thought the 7 days really means the 7 whole days, but what it really means is to practice Nianfo regularly, and also the interpretation of what it means to be single-mindedly to practice Nianfo, so which I have made a video about this. So in Master Yi's commentary, we will see the Q&A sessions regarding about this sutra. So someone asked, the longer Amitabha Sutra, which is also the Infinite Life Sutra, speaks of attaining rebirth in the Pure Land through 10 recitations of the Buddha name. Is this referring to ordinary times or to the time when we are about to die? Attaining rebirth in the Pure Land through 10 recitations of the Buddha name applies to both times. If we recite the Buddha name 10 times each morning, this is an ordinary occasion. On the other hand, the longer Amitabha Sutra speaks of attaining rebirth in the Pure Land through 10 recitations, and this is the same as what the Meditation Sutra says. This refers to when we are on the brink of death. So just know that in the Infinite Life Sutra, in the 18th round, we don't see Amitabha Buddha mentioned specifically about at the time of death. Well, this is because it's been already mentioned in the Amitabha Sutra. So when we comprehend the Pure Land Sutras, we shall really comprehend them as a whole. And because it has been mentioned in the Amitabha Sutra, so it was not necessary for the Buddha to repeat this again and again in the Infinite Life Sutra or in the Meditation Sutra. It's implied. But we also shall not fall into extreme interpretations that, oh, in that case, we don't need to do anything now and we only recite at the time of death. If we don't recite it now, how can we guarantee that whenever impermanence hits us, we actually can remember the name? So Master Yi in his commentary also says, if we have not done the work of reciting the Buddha name single-mindedly during ordinary times, how can we reach the Pure Land through 10 recitations or a single recitation when we are on the brink of death? It would be one chance in a million if someone who had committed many evils were to have a causal basis from past lives ripen as he was on the brink of death, enabling him to meet a spiritual friend, hear his teaching, and develop faith and vows. How could he be so lucky? Doubts and Questions about the Pure Land, book by Master Tiantai, has refuted this idea of waiting till death to practice Buddha recitation in great detail. People these days should read that book. So we shall not fall into extreme interpretations, and we shall cultivate our Nianfo practice with a sincere mind from now on and also to the time of death. And the cases like Zhang Shanhe, like all these people who have committed evil deeds, and they are so lucky that they met a monk at the time of death who told them about this, and they took belief instantly. So these are really, really lucky. And when I say lucky, it also means it was the manifestation of the good karma from their past lives that got ripened at the time of death. So this is really rare. And also Master Shandao never says that one can just seek rebirth without being mindful of Amitabha Buddha at the time of death. You will not find any words like this in Master Shandao's commentary on the Contemplation Sutra, which I also studied, and there was nowhere in the commentary you can find such words. And Master Shandao emphasized very much about practicing Nianfo with a sincere mind, like what the Buddha told us in the Visualization Sutra. It's important for us to practice Nianfo with a sincere mind, otherwise it's unlikely we can seek rebirth to the Pure Land. For instance, if someone goes around and committing all the bad deeds and he has no heart of repentance and thinking that he could just rely on Amitabha Buddha to deliver him to the Pure Land, well, this will not work. This kind of mindset, it will not resonate with the Buddha's heart, and he will not be able to elicit a response from Amitabha Buddha in this way. On the other hand, if someone committed bad deeds and he was really repentant about what he did, who was remorseful, and he really wanted to take refuge from Amitabha Buddha, then this will work. So it's really important that when we recite the name of Amitabha Buddha, we should do it with sincerity. And by practicing Nianfo with sincerity can also help us change our karma to have a better karma and to perhaps avoid any possible manifestation of negative karma at the critical time, the time of exit. So I'm going to share 2 failed rebirth cases just for Nianfo practitioners to be alert. So these are also very famous failed rebirth cases. So the first one was an old lay Buddhist who was actually a diligent Nianfo practitioner, but he just had this really strong attachment to lust, that he was particularly attached to his young wife. So in the old days in China, a man could have a few wives, and he was very much attached to his youngest wife, and so was this young wife. They were very much attached to each other. But he practiced Nianfo really diligently, and he saw Amitabha Buddha a few days before his death, and he told everyone, okay, come to Nianfo with me after a few days. I'm going to gain rebirth to the Pure Land. And everybody came on the day of his supposed rebirth. So they were started to chant Amitofo for him. And after a while, he became so happy. He told others that I have seen Amitabha Buddha and the Western 3 sages. They have come to receive me. But just at this moment, the young wife came in, crying hysterically, and not only that, she was even like shaking him, screaming from the top of her head, how could you leave me? What happened if you die? What am I gonna do? You know, this wife was very, very much attached to him, and she was crying hysterically, and other people tried to pull her, but they couldn't. So when this man saw his young wife and heard she was crying, he also became attached and thought, oh, what is she gonna do if I leave now? And immediately when this kind of thoughts arise, Amitabha Buddha and all the 3 Western sages, they disappeared, and he screamed. He was like, oh no, Amitabha Buddha and the Western 3 sages have left. I can't see them now. And then he died, and his face all turned black. So it was very unfortunate that he missed his opportunity of rebirth because of his attachment to his young wife. So the Buddhas, they know all of our thoughts. So if at the time of death, if we have the thoughts of attachment to other things apart from Amitabha Buddha, then we may not be able to seek rebirth successfully, like we have seen in this case. And that is why a lot of Nianfo practitioners, when they know the time of their rebirth, they prefer to go alone quietly, like we have seen in the US Grandma's case and also in Master Haixian's case. They all left alone. So this was also to prevent the potential attachment from family members and other people that may prevent them from seeking rebirth successfully. And another failed rebirth case happened to this old grandma who was also a lay Buddhist, also a diligent Nianfo practitioner. However, at the time of death, maybe it was the manifestation of negative karma. She was completely unconscious. She could not gather her consciousness to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha, even if there were other people who were trying to assist her to Nianfo, but she just couldn't. So she was not mindful of Amitabha Buddha, and she did not seek rebirth successfully at the time of death. Although she practiced Nianfo regularly, but she was maybe not practicing it with a sincere mind. So she had negative karma, but maybe she did not feel repentant. So it did not really help her to sort of clear the negative karma, and which got manifested at the time of her death. So the other people there wanted to assist her Nianfo during the battle period, but unfortunately her children, they did not understand this. They just quickly touch her body. This really brings a lot of suffering to the person who just passed, because the consciousness is likely have not exited the body yet. Usually it takes about 8 to 12 hours, best 24 hours, not to touch the body of the deceased. This is the best for them to have a smooth transition from this physical body to the other realm. So they touched her body and they got changed for her really quickly. All the children, they were not Buddhists, they didn't understand all this, and then they told the other people who were trying to assist her to Nianfo to get away. At the time of her death, she really died a horrible death. Her eyes were really big, as if she felt really shocking and really angry, and her face was really much twisted. Her body was very hard, and the people who were there, they touched her knees. Her knees were the last part that got cold, so it was likely that she reincarnated as an animal, and from her facial expression, with this anger and maybe hatred, it was likely that she even became like snake, those animals with sort of a fierce spirit. So our last thoughts of death are really important. They're really critical. They determine where we might go in our next life. If our last thoughts are on Amitabha Buddha, then we will again rebirth to the Pure Land. If our last thoughts are on attachment, ignorance, delusions, anger, hatred, then we will reincarnate again back in the 6 realms in accordance to our karma. And if our thoughts are not good, it's likely we're gonna fall into the 3 evil realms. So it is important to keep the mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha in our everyday life, and also at the time of death, and particularly at the time of death. These are really the critical time that determine where we will go after leaving this physical body. It's like our final exam day, and all our daily practices are to prepare for the final exam. Of course, we should not over worry about what might happen in the final exam, whether there might be a thunderstorm or lightning, really bad weather or heavy traffic on the day. We shouldn't over worry about this, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be prepared for it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't practice the final exam repeatedly in our daily life, which we know the answer is super easy. It's just to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha single-mindedly. So if our practice is very deep, then no matter what happens on the day of the final exam, even if we might fall into a coma, we still remember the name of Amitabha Buddha. So even if for sometimes people fall into coma, the consciousness still functions. And if our practice is deep enough, even if we are in a coma, the name will appear automatically. So when our practice has passed a certain degree, automatically the name will just be repeated by itself. It's like effortless effort. You don't even need to feel that you need to remember to recite. The name will just come up automatically, and this is really what we want to do if we want to be guaranteed rebirth and to clear bad karma. It's important we are diligent in our everyday practice, and it's important that we recite the name sincerely with a sincere mind. It's important that we cultivate good deeds and good karma and transfer the merit towards seeking rebirth to the Pure Land. So may we all obtain rebirth successfully to the land of ultimate bliss in one lifetime. Namo Amituofo Buddha. Namo Amituofo.